Early on the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 al-Qaeda terrorists hijacked 4 commercial U.S. jetliners en route to San Francisco and Los Angeles after takeoff from Boston, Newark, and Washington, D.C. None of these flights were ever to reach their intended destination, and shortly after takeoff, our nation, along with the rest of the world, would soon learn of the calculated and horrific attack that would quickly ensue. 8:46 a.m., 5 hijackers crashed American Airlines Flight 11 into One World Trade Center. 9:03 a.m., another 5 hijackers crashed United Airlines Flight 175 into 2 World Trade Center. 9:37 a.m., 5 hijackers flew American Airlines Flight 77 into the Pentagon. And at 10:03 a.m., despite the heroic efforts from crew and passengers who fought to take back control of the plane, the 4th and final flight, under control of 4 hijackers, crashed United Airlines Flight 93 into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Nearly 3,000 people were killed on that day, the single largest loss of life from a foreign attack on American soil. Today, September 11, 2011, 10 years later, communities all over this great nation, just like St. Joseph Ogden, are coming together to recognize and remember the attack, the loss, and the heroes who emerged during September 11, 2001. Good afternoon, and welcome to the St. Joseph Ogden Community 9/11 Remembrance. Please rise and join the local singing group, Vocal Point, in the singing of our national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please remain standing as the Reverend Mark Harris of the St. Joseph United Methodist Church leads us all in prayer.
Would you pray with me? Gracious and loving God, all of us remember where we were 10 years ago today. We know exactly what we were doing and who we were with when we heard that terrible news. And the reality is, dear God, that our lives changed forever at that moment. And Lord, the amazing thing is 10 years later, it's still just as raw as it was that day. So I certainly pray that today is a day of remembrance, that we remember the people who lost their lives. But I also pray that today is a day of resolve, when we stand steadfast and commit to moving forward with joy and conviction in our hearts, so that the terrorist of that day did not win. Bless this event and events like it that are going on around the country, Lord, and continue to push us forward to do your will. For it is in your name that we pray. Amen.
And now we ask you to join our scouts as they lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance.
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. John Sims is a veteran of the U.S. Army where he served as a chaplain's assistant during the Vietnam era. While in the Army, he felt God's call to ministry and has been a United Methodist minister for the past 40 years. He served as pastor of the St. Joseph United Methodist Church for 7 years, from 1997 to 2004. He is currently the pastor of the First United Methodist Church of Urbana. While serving as pastor at St. Joseph, he became a disaster chaplain with the National Transportation Safety Board in 2000. He was on call as the disaster chaplain of September 11, 2001. He spent almost 2 weeks working at or near the Ground Zero site, ministering to victims' families and first responders. His responsibility at Ground Zero was to escort and to be with the families as they saw the devastation at Ground Zero for the first time. Here to tell us more about his firsthand experiences of 9/11, please welcome Dr. John Sims.
Thank you. Thank you. Please be seated. This is like coming home to myself and my wife Sharon. In 1998, our son Adam was tragically killed while a student at the University of Illinois and while we were here serving the St. Joseph United Methodist Church. I have not had a chance to thank this community for your help in that difficult time. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, St. Joseph. Thank you. You will always hold a special place in my family's heart. This day is about remembrance, as my friend Mark Harris says. It's about remembrance and what you do with it. I was at Ground Zero for almost 2 weeks. There are some things I could talk about. There are other things that I simply won't talk about, that are too painful, and so many of you know how those kind of memories go. One memory I remember very clearly was a fellow minister, Father Dennis was his name, conducting a worship service one morning for victims' families and using as his text an obscure Old Testament book named Habakkuk. If you don't know where it is, you won't find it. You have to want to go to Habakkuk. And as he began the service, I asked him, I said, Father Dennis, why do you want to preach from Habakkuk? Nobody preaches from Habakkuk, right? When was the last time you in your church heard a sermon from the Old Testament prophet Habakkuk? I rest my case. Father Dennis looked at me and he said, John, it's about patience. It's about patience. Each and every generation has life-changing events that so influence the way they understand meaning and purpose in life that everything from that moment on is influenced by that one event. My grandfather used to love to tell me what he was doing on Sunday, December 7th, 1941, and many of you can. Many of you can also remember where you were on November the 22nd, 1963, when your teacher ran in and said, the president's been shot. Still more of us can remember where we were when we heard that President Reagan had been shot at. Even more of us can remember what we were doing when we heard we had bombed Afghanistan. And all of us can remember where we were when Osama bin Laden received his ultimate justice. It's influential. I am not going to stand here, ladies and gentlemen, and tell you stories about Ground Zero. Like you, I found that trying to watch the television today was difficult at best. After a while, the tears just flowed, and I had a lot to do today. And so did you.
what do we do with that? What do we take from this event? And this is what my few remarks are going to be. Let me suggest that what I want you to take from this 10-year anniversary remembrance is to live life with faith and hope. Faith and hope. Live life in such a way that faith and hope are made real, and not just intellectual categories, nor emotional constructs, but rather that we live our lives as people dedicated to the God who gave us those very things, faith and hope. And when we do that, then everything changes. Because our attitude and our outlook changes. Notice I didn't say the hurt goes away. Notice I didn't say that somehow we could find meaning, because you know what? Every single one of us on 9/11/2001 were frozen in powerlessness. Remember what that was like? That horrible feeling in the pit of your stomach? That wanting to do something for someone and not knowing what to do. So what you did was call your loved one, or a loved one called you. And they didn't have to say, "Are you watching TV?" They just had to say, "I need to talk. I need to talk to you. I need to tell you how I feel about you." Ladies and gentlemen, if you take anything from this ceremony today, live life with faith and hope. The second thing I learned from my experience at Ground Zero is vigilance always requires respect. Vigilance comes from that Latin word from which we also get our word vigilante. And we know what that is. We know who they are. Vigilance requires respect. Of course it means that we keep vigil. We keep a sense of readiness and preparedness. And like you, I don't know those TSA officers that well for them to touch me like that at the airport. But they do. And that's okay. Because if you and I return to hatred, if you and I return to a kind of prejudice that says anyone who doesn't dress like us, who wears clothing different from us, who doesn't speak like we do, who doesn't look like we look here in St. Joseph, then the terrorists will have won. Because our vigilance must be filled with respect, with an acceptance of the values of what it means to be an American, to hold these truths self-evident, that all people are created equal, to make the greater prosperity for all people, to work together, not in separateness or divisiveness, but together for the good of this country. And when we do that, then vigilance is worthwhile. Mayor Bloomberg last week from New York said, "Freedom is fragile," and it is. It's fragile. But nevertheless, it requires a touch of respect. And finally, I believe that every single one of us must take from the experiences of 9/11 the truth that love has no limits. Love is not to be limited by our group or our understanding or our culture, but we are to love without limits. And I'm saying that's hard. Everybody here knows that's hard. But that's not a Christian thing, and it's not a Jewish thing, and it's not an Islamic thing, and it's not a Buddhist thing, and it's not a none of the above thing. We are all children of our Creator. We are all children of our Creator and who have been tasked to stand up and share God's love. That's why I also want to say thank you to the St. Joseph community and to so many of you who took time out to go down and help with the devastation in Joplin I saw your pictures. And those of you whose churches sent truckloads of food to people. Because you see what Todd Beamer told his wife from Flight 93 as it was about to crash. Remember that? She wrote a book on it. In the background, she heard her husband say, "Okay, let's roll. Let's roll." I want you to look at these people. There isn't a one of them here as a responder who would take the label hero. None of us are heroes. There is not a responder I know, civilian or badged or sworn or unsworn, who would ever take that label. What responders say and do is step up. We step up. Whether it be for a Texas wildfire above Austin, or a flooded town in Vermont, or a hurricane in some foreign country, or a tornado devastation in Joplin, responders step up. That's what our God is asking us to do today. That's what I learned at Ground Zero. Because as I stood on that viewing platform and looked at utter devastation for 16 square blocks, when I was there, the pile was still smoking, the dust was still choking in the air, people were still dealing with the smell of death. And what these people did, what these responders did was step up. I think our God is calling us to do that too. If we are people of faith, and we are, then we set aside these petty difficulties and distinctions, and we say that, yes, I will step up. And stepping up today, ladies and gentlemen, means living your life with faith and hope, with vigilance that speaks to and makes real respect, that leads all the way to love without limits. That's what I learned at Ground Zero. Thank you for having me.